Hey there people, how you doing? So, today we have a revamped camera comparison between the OnePlus 8 Pro and the Galaxy Note 20 Ultra. Now the reason I'm doing this now is because, well, firstly I don't have anything else to do until the S21 comes out, and secondly, because at this moment I have all the major updates that were there for the Note 20 and the OnePlus 8 Pro. We have Android 11 on both of them, and whatever camera updates and tweaks were to come, they are here. And I think this is the final refined stage for these cameras. So the results you're gonna see today are probably gonna continue to be the results, and they're not gonna really change for maybe a few years to come at least. So with that said, let's begin with the first image. So here we have quite literally almost zero differences, because both of them look near identical and both look very natural actually, because it looks almost exactly how it looked to my eyes. Now of course, the Note 20 Ultra does have slightly more vibrant greens in particular, as you can see in the grass and all that, but the OnePlus 8 Pro is not bad, not in the slightest. I do want to say that I'm fairly impressed that the OnePlus 8 Pro's white balance problems, wherein it would make most images look super blue, is almost completely gone now. It's a lot better in my opinion. Moving on to this ultra-wide shot. Now there are certain differences here, albeit quite minor, so do keep that in mind. So firstly, the Note 20 Ultra is quite a bit wider as compared to the OnePlus 8 Pro. Another difference that I can notice is that the overall shadows have a little bit more detail on the Note 20 Ultra. It's again minor, not a major difference. Maybe most people won't even care about it, but it's a difference nonetheless. And also the greens, once again, a little bit more vibrant, and I do like the colors on the building on the Note 20 Ultra. So yeah, there are certain things that are better on the Note 20 Ultra that altogether add up to, I think, win my preference for this one. Now this is a main camera image, and well, the one reason that I prefer the OnePlus 8 Pro is that there is just a little bit more highlight preservation in the sky in the background. You can see that there's a sun back there and it's overexposed on both of them, but the OnePlus does manage to control just a little bit on the upper part of the sky. The Note does not do that, and overall shadows are comparably similar, so for that reason I'm going with the OnePlus for this one. Everything else, so colors and all that, very similar to the point that it doesn't even matter. Now these are the optical zoom images 5 times on the Note versus 3 times on the OnePlus 8 Pro. And yes, of course, the conditions are extremely harsh, backlit with the sun in the background. It's obvious that neither of them will perform admirably well, but I gotta say the OnePlus looks very nice. Now this is the first image I took for the Note, and here I would say it looks a little flat in my opinion, because the contrast is really not present because it's trying to ramp up the shadows, and the highlight control isn't particularly great in my opinion. Now this is the second image I took on the Note, and well, the shadows are crushed a little bit more than the previous one, but it does look a little bit more balanced in terms of the contrast. But overall, I do think that the OnePlus 8 Pro did a better job in terms of maintaining the contrast and also the highlights in the upper part of the image. It's quite good processing, although the zoom range is not as high. Now we have another ultra-wide image, and this one is particularly interesting because, as you can see on the building, the Note is making the highlights look super yellow for some reason. Everything else looks actually better on the Note. I do like the greens on the Note quite a bit more, but the yellow on the highlights, it's just so drastic, and I'm not exactly a fan of how the Note is handling the highlights, so I am going with the OnePlus for this one. Moving on to the main camera shot, and here the problem with the yellow highlights is much lower, thankfully, and the other differences do stand because I do like the greens on the Note 20 Ultra, as I said before, and hence I do think I'm gonna go with the Note 20 Ultra for this image. Moving on to 3 times zoom. Now 3 times on the Note 20 Ultra is digital zoom entirely, so the overall sharpness is not as high and the level of detail is not that great as on the OnePlus 8 Pro, because OnePlus has 3 times optical zoom. But everything else is very similar except for the highlights. They once again look super yellow, so indeed overall the preference does go to the OnePlus 8 Pro for this one. But the moment we move on to 5 times zoom, the whole thing turns 180, because the Note 20 Ultra now has much better colors, much better detail, much better shadows, and well, the overall image is better as you'd expect. On the OnePlus, surprisingly the colors changed up. Now I can understand the sacrifice in detail because it's trying to digitally zoom in, but the colors, that I did not expect, so easily the Note 20 Ultra takes the win here. 10 times zoom, a similar story. The Note has much better colors, and obviously the details and noise are just not as nice on the OnePlus 8 Pro. The Note with 10 times zoom, having periscope zoom at 5 times is helping out a lot, as it is evidently visible, and so easily, once again, a win for the Note 20 Ultra. Now just for safe measure, I wanted to take another 5 times zoom shot on the Note versus 3 times zoom on the OnePlus 8 Pro, and well, I gotta say both of them did a tremendous job here because both are depicting the sun very well. It's reflecting off of the building and they're controlling those highlights amazingly well. I'd expected that either one of these might end up blowing it out, but well, they're doing a fantastic job. Secondly, I do want to say that the overall greens do look slightly more appealing to my eyes, at least on the Note 20 Ultra. Your preference may differ, you may not like the extra vibrance the Note is giving it, but well, I prefer it, so I'm gonna go with the Note 20 Ultra. Now one thing that the OnePlus 8 Pro is clearly better at as compared to the Note is macro photography, and this isn't some trash can 2 megapixel macro camera that it uses, no. The OnePlus 8 Pro uses a 48 megapixel ultra-wide camera for its macro photography, and hence you can see the quality of the image is beyond impressive. The Note is alright, I mean this is as far as the focusing distance could get, or as near, but the OnePlus 8 Pro evidently can get quite a bit closer. Now these are the higher resolution images on the Note 20 Ultra and OnePlus 8 Pro. We have 108 megapixels on the Note versus 48 megapixels on the OnePlus, so almost half the resolution on the OnePlus, and that does have its upsides, let me tell you, because just looking at this image without zooming in or anything, you can see that the dynamic range on the OnePlus 8 Pro is miles better than the Note 20 Ultra. It's evident that such a high resolution 100 megapixels is a bit too much for the processing to handle, and hence dynamic range takes a much larger hit as compared to the 48 megapixel on the OnePlus 8 Pro. But upon cropping in to 500%, well, anyone in the right mind would expect that 100 megapixels on the Note 20 Ultra would have better detail as compared to the OnePlus, but that really isn't the case. If anything at all, I would say that the OnePlus 8 Pro actually manages to get much cleaner and overall slightly more detailed images. You can see right here, it's actually edging towards the OnePlus, and given that we are having better dynamic range on the OnePlus 8 Pro, it's clear that 48 megapixels is the perfect sweet spot for 2020 flagships. Going any higher to the 108 megapixel range, you do lose a lot of processing, and the detail isn't exactly such staggeringly good that it would warrant using 108 megapixels. Now enough daylight, let's go on to some portraits, and I am using a studio light to give us more of an ideal lighting situation, and as you can see, well, this is a normal image, and I wouldn't be surprised if you guys believe that the OnePlus 8 Pro's image looked like that of an iPhone, because I could quite easily say that it has the tendencies of an iPhone with a flatter look and the very natural skin tones. I mean, the Note, of course, it's not bad. It has a little bit more saturation on my face, it has a little bit more contrast. The contrast I do like, the saturation maybe not so much, but well, this difference is not something I expected. I had expected that the skin tones on the OnePlus 8 Pro would be a lot more red. As you'll see in a few moments, there are those examples as well. But anyways, let's move on to some portraits now. And here, once again, I do like the skin tones of the OnePlus 8 Pro. And one major difference that I can see here is that the Note 20 Ultra is keeping Valentine's highlights in check while it is slightly blowing out the highlights on my face. But the OnePlus 8 Pro is doing the exact opposite. It is blowing out some highlights on Valentine versus keeping highlights on my face in check a lot more. It's honestly a weird difference that I didn't really expect to see, because it's either you have highlights on the control or you do not. But differentiating between two subjects, well, that's not something I expected. Now these are the zoomed in images. We have 2x zoom on the Note 20 Ultra, and yes, it's digital. It doesn't have the highest quality and I would not recommend using it. Also, the edge detection on the Note isn't that great. It is cutting on Valentine, which is, as you'd know, completely unacceptable. But jokes aside, the OnePlus, it doesn't do a great job. The contrast is super high, it is blowing out the highlights, the shadows are not that well exposed, so even though the details are not as nice as on the OnePlus, I do think I'm gonna go with the Note 20 Ultra here. Moving on to selfies, now this is what I was talking about. The OnePlus 8 Pro skin tones used to at least look like these. The selfie camera still has that crazy redness. I mean, I look like a tomato right there. The Note is doing a much better job, let me tell you, because the skin tones look amazing, the highlights are under control. Shadows, sure, a little bit of it is crushed, but so it is on the OnePlus, so I'm not exactly complaining here. I do think I'm gonna go with the Note because the skin tones are so much more pleasing. Now, just increasing the harshness of the conditions a little, we have much high contrast on my face in terms of the highlights and shadows, and, well, other than the fact that the skin tones are just crazy on the OnePlus 8 Pro selfie camera, I have to say the highlights are better controlled on the Note 20 Ultra. And well, if you were to just ignore skin tones, I would still say that the Note is doing a better job. Now this portrait selfie right here, I just wanted to see how each of these cameras would handle normal room lighting, because I didn't use a studio light for this one. And well, there are two sides of this image, because firstly, the OnePlus 8 Pro is super blue, which is making the skin look not so nice. I mean, it's not bad, it's not as red as before, for which I'm just honestly thankful, but because of the extra blues that it's got, I do think that the overall background looks a lot more punchy. The painting, the wall, it all looks a lot more vibrant in my opinion. The Note, on the other hand, it does have much better skin tones, and the couch in the background does look a lot more realistic in terms of the beige color. But the main reason why I'm going for the Note 20 Ultra is because the edge detection on the Note is quite a bit better. As you can see, the OnePlus did mess up, and it included the couch, which is supposed to be in the background, alongside me as a subject. Now, just to test out how portrait dynamic range was, I went super close to that studio light and just clicked a picture. And as you can see, the OnePlus is not even usable at this point because the highlights are blown out. Edge detection on the right side, as you can see, is just not there. I mean, it didn't even consider that as part of the background. So yeah, overall the Note does quite easily take the win for this one. Another thing that the Note does take a win for is night mode selfie, because it has the feature. The OnePlus, quite sadly, it doesn't have a night mode selfie. I'm pretty sure it would do a tremendously good job if it had one, but it doesn't, and so it's clear that the amount of grain and noise on the OnePlus, alongside the fact that the dynamic range is just not as good, it's pretty obvious that the Note 20 Ultra takes a win. Now moving on to rear camera night modes. Here, well, this is an interesting situation here because it wasn't super dark, but the overall wind was a major factor to determine which image would be better. The Note did take up to 2 seconds of exposure, while the OnePlus 8 Pro took just 1 second, and that apparently makes a huge difference because you can see there is a ton of motion blur. Now of course it was a little windy, so it's expected, but the OnePlus is actually doing a better job. But then I took a normal image with the Note 20 Ultra, no night mode or anything, and well, clearly the motion blur is gone, but the quality of night mode is just not present. Now this night mode photo was kind of interesting because I wanted to see how each of these phones would handle these highlights. Now the OnePlus is blowing out more of these highlights. You can see the lamps in the background, and the Note, on the other hand, it does have slightly lower brightness overall in terms of the shadows, but the highlights are definitely a lot more well controlled. It looks a lot more realistic as to how my eyes saw it. Now, of course, one thing I do want to point out is that both of these are doing a tremendously well job in terms of rendering the sky. It's super clean and the darkness of the sky is very well represented. I mean, this image looks tremendously good on both. I would say that it entirely depends on preference. Now my preference, if you're interested, I think it goes to the OnePlus 8 Pro because I prefer vibrant colors. Now this image was very interesting because as you can see, the Note 20 Ultra did not focus on those leaves. I'm not entirely sure why that happened. The OnePlus 8 Pro, it had no issues as such. I just framed the shot and clicked the picture. That's it. The Note 20 Ultra, I tried tap to focus and everything else, shifting, moving, whatever. None of them resulted in the Note 20 Ultra shifting focus to the foreground. Now this is an ultra wide angle shot and well, I would say both look very nice. The sky, I do prefer it on the Note because it does have that night darkness to it. Everything else, so it looks very similar. The highlights control and everything, very similar on both of them. The details are also similarly very similar. Moving on to the main camera, and well, here once again, I don't think there are any major differences other than the fact that the sky is just a pinch darker on the Note 20 Ultra. It's not a major difference like the ultra-wide camera, so I'm just gonna call this one a tie. Now this is ultra low light, and yes, as you'd expect, it was slightly backlit. Now I do want to say that neither of these nailed the color of the light because the Note looks magenta for some reason and the OnePlus looks completely white. The actual color of the light was a mild warm white, and well, neither of them managed to nail that. But other than that, the details, the shadow exposure, it's all very similar and all very good, to be honest, given the situation. Now this one, we have ultra low light with the ultra wide cameras on both of them. The OnePlus 8 Pro, this is like a reference image. This is how dark it looked. And well, as you can see, it's horribly dark. And the Note 20 Ultra, this is a night mode I'm showing you guys. Now, moving on to the night mode on the OnePlus 8 Pro. Well, it is an improvement, sure, but it's really not that good. You can see my painting right out the center. All of those little lines on the bottom part of it, they're just not visible. They're completely smudged up. And the saturation, dear God, the saturation of the face on the left, well, that's not nice. That does not look nice. The OnePlus 8 Pro just, it completely maxed out all the reds in there and it's not appealing. Now, the Note 20 Ultra, it did a much better job, obviously. So yeah, it does get a win for this one. So that is finally it for this comparison, and I gotta say, it was a very close call because I remember the first time I did the OnePlus 8 Pro versus Note 20 Ultra camera comparison, and there it was more like the OnePlus 8 Pro came close, but it never really got ahead too much. Here, however, I would say that if you go with either of these, you probably wouldn't even have to look back because the OnePlus 8 Pro at this very moment, it has tremendously good cameras. I mean, that goes without saying, to be honest, because the OnePlus 8 Pro, with all of its software and the camera updates that it had, it has ramped up its camera game by quite a bit. It's impressive, to be entirely honest, and I really like that OnePlus has been paying attention and giving us all of these major updates. They were much needed, and they have made the experience of using the cameras of the OnePlus 8 Pro that much better, and the fact that it can stack up to a $1,300 device, it says a lot. I mean, of course, there are certain situations wherein the sheer hardware of the Note 20 Ultra can take a lead. For example, zoom. The Note 20 Ultra has some of the best zoom capabilities out there on any smartphone basically, because we have 5 times optical zoom, and after that you can go up to 20 times zoom and you'll probably get a more than decent image. Now that I can't really say for the OnePlus 8 Pro. I mean, it's nice. 3 times optical zoom, you can go up to 10 times and yes, you'll get a fairly nice image, but as you saw, the difference between 10 times on the Note 20 Ultra versus OnePlus 8 Pro was massive, to say the least. To conclude, I do think that at this moment the OnePlus 8 Pro's camera in terms of photography has caught up with the Note 20 Ultra, except for certain hardware features like the zoom. Everything else is basically similar. It could go either ways for the most part. So with that said, I do hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, do hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and I will be seeing you guys later. Cheers.